People in the Republic of Ireland are under their first day of a strict new 2-week lockdown across the country. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar said people should only leave their homes in specific circumstances. It means the conditions are now similar on both sides of the Irish border. 4 people have died and more than 130 are showing flu-like symptoms on a cruise ship stranded off the coast of Panama. More than 1,800 people, including some Britons, are on board the Zan Dam, which is being refused permission to dock. And the latest figures from Spain show the relentless rise of the pandemic there, with another 832 deaths in the past 24 hours alone.
In Russia, a partial shutdown has come into effect today, with bars, restaurants, parks and entertainment venues shut across the country in an effort to contain the spread of the coronavirus. According to government statistics, Russia has a relatively low number of infections so far, although many believe the official figures don't tell the full story. From Moscow, Steve Rosenberg reports.
At times, it felt like just another Saturday in Moscow. But today was anything but normal. The park by the Kremlin, usually packed, was empty. The iconic Red Square department store, GUM, shut. All cafes and restaurants in Russia, too. To slow the spread of coronavirus, Russians are being asked to stay off the streets. But not everyone's listening. They've exaggerated the danger, Nikolai says. I'm not scared of anything. Moscow says everyone over 65 must stay at home. Hard to enforce. But the restrictions have reduced the crowds. Until very recently, the Kremlin was saying that everything here is under control. That in fact, there is no coronavirus epidemic in Russia. Now shops are closing, flights in and out of the country are suspended, and people are being urged to stay at home. It's a mixed message, which is causing confusion. So is some of the coverage on Russian TV. A deadly virus risks becoming a source of entertainment. But the illness is spreading here. We were allowed to film this Moscow medical facility, repurposed for coronavirus cases. Hospitals across the city are preparing for a flood of patients. This week, Moscow's mayor told President Putin the situation in the capital was serious, and he admitted there were far more cases of coronavirus here than official figures had been suggesting. And yet, despite the danger of infection, the churches remain open. No social distancing here. They want to be close to God. It's impossible to get infected in a church because it is a holy place, says Eire. She's a doctor. More restrictions are expected, possibly a full lockdown, to protect Russia. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
The high-profile London-based satellite startup OneWeb has filed for bankruptcy protection in the US just weeks after a series of successful launches into space. Well, the firm has been building a network to deliver broadband across the world, but blames the Covid-19 crisis for its inability to secure new investment. OneWeb, which is based in Shepherd's Bush, says it's laying off most of its staff while it seeks a buyer for the company. Back to the impact of the virus now, and countless weddings have had to be postponed as a result of the outbreak.
This ring I give to you is a symbol of my love. I pledge to you.
Like that of Meghan Kennedy and Thomas Cahoon from Dulwich. Well, their big day was supposed to be today, so instead of writing it off completely, they had a celebration which guests joined via social media. The actual wedding will now take place in October. Good luck to them.
In Italy, which already have the highest death toll in the world from the virus, the death toll there has risen above 10,000. The country now has more than 92,000 confirmed cases. Here's Jean Mackenzie in Rome.
A lifeline landing in Lombardy. Converted into a mobile hospital, this morning the German military flew critically ill patients from Italy's worst-hit region to hospitals around Germany. Italy's outbreak has been so concentrated in the north that hospitals are struggling to cope. Today, Italy has reached a sobering milestone. More than 10,000 people dead. After nearly 900 more deaths were recorded since yesterday. There is some hope here. The rate of new infections has slowed over the past week, an indication that this lockdown, which began nearly 3 weeks ago, is starting to work. But Italians are wary of being too hopeful just yet, with the number of deaths still coming so fast. But the government's medical researchers say these recent deaths don't mean Italy isn't making progress. These days will now be critical in finding out whether Italy can hit its peak and turn the corner.
Millions of homeless people and migrant labourers have been left in the lurch after India announced a 21-day lockdown to try to contain the spread of coronavirus there. With factories and construction sites closing down, many have expressed fears that they might starve to death. Arunadhay Mukherjee reports from Delhi.
A jarring image in times of a nationwide lockdown. Thousands of migrant workers pour out onto the streets of India's capital city, New Delhi. The government arranging buses to help them get home 4 days after the lockdown started. But the sheer number of stranded has overwhelmed authorities. Social distancing here doesn't exist. Many had already set off on foot soon after the lockdown was announced, travelling unthinkable distances.
There are no buses. I have to walk another 260 kilometers to get to my village. There's no work here. That is why we are running away.
All of India was ordered into a 21-day lockdown to limit the spread of coronavirus. The pandemic has crippled the economy, shutting down factories and businesses, leaving hundreds of thousands without jobs. 90% of India's workforce is employed in the unorganized sector, which is the worst hit.
There are many daily wage laborers who will not find work. Other than having an economic impact, it will also have, there is a huge social impact that will happen here.
Earlier this week, the Indian Finance Minister announced a $23 billion package just for the poor.
We do not want anyone to remain hungry. We are looking at both cash transfer as one set of measures, and another set of measures will be food security related.
On the same day, barely a few miles away, this was the reality on the streets of Old Delhi. The poor and homeless queuing up for the 2 meals a day promised to them.
We have been hungry since morning, and now we are getting this food. Can we survive on this?
Facing criticism, the government has promised to help those unable to get home, assuring food, shelter and medical help. For the poor, it may solve the immediate problem, but it's the uncertainty of the near future without any jobs that they're most worried about. As India battles a rising number of coronavirus cases, a health emergency is just one of the many concerns. Arunadhay Mukherjee, BBC News, Delhi.
The British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says that he's spoken to his Indian counterpart about ways to bring back British citizens stranded in India. It's thought thousands of British travellers and holiday makers remain stuck there. They say they feel abandoned by the government. Our South Asia correspondent Regina Vaidyanathan reports.
Once crowded beaches, now under curfew. For many British tourists in India, dream holidays have turned into misery.
In the Chinese city of Wuhan, where the global coronavirus emergency began, some transport services are resuming as Hubei province gradually lifts its lockdown, with the coronavirus crisis apparently stabilising there for the time being. James Ransley reports.
Wuhan's train station, once an empty hub, is now busy with people with places to be. The city is slowly and steadily coming back to life. Wuhan, a major engine of the Chinese economy, got its freight train service back up and running. It's carrying medical supplies and electronics to Europe. The city's banks opened earlier this week for business, and buses are back on the roads. But residents are still being advised against unnecessary travel, and those over 65 told to avoid taking public transport altogether. People are allowed to enter Wuhan, but restrictions on those wishing to leave won't be lifted until April 8th. The city in Hubei province was placed under lockdown back in January. Its 11 million people have faced some of the harshest restrictions on daily life. In Hubei, more than 50,000 people have been infected with the disease. More than 3,000 have died. But the partial reopening of Wuhan signals a turning point in China's fight against the virus. After months of enduring total lockdown, life for the people of Wuhan is beginning to get back on track.
The Royal Mint is to manufacture up to 4,000 medical visors per day to help protect NHS staff from coronavirus. Engineers who are used to working on coins and related machinery developed a successful prototype in just 48 hours, and the first visors are already in use at a hospital in Wales. Production is now moving to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the Royal Mint's site in South Wales. This is BBC News.